Today we have Tania Seger, who is the CEO of Plastomics Inc. And she has a lot of executive experience from her several positions in the past. And today she's going to be talking about influential leadership and strategies on how to have influential leadership with emotional intelligence. So welcome. And I'm so excited that you're here today with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's go back to the beginning of your career. Where did you find the confidence to be able to share your thoughts and viewpoints? Was that ever a problem for you, or were you born confident and just sharing everything you had to say, just expressing yourself fully with conviction and determination and being definitive? Or is that something that you had to learn?
Yeah, gosh, I wish it would have been that easy, to be honest with you. I started working in the late 80s, so I'm dating myself. And my very first job was with United Van Lines, which is a moving company. And I can remember my first day on the job, a woman who was assigned to me as my mentor, and I was very lucky that she was my mentor, to be honest with you. I just realized that later. She took me to the cafeteria. And at United Van Lines in Fenton, Missouri, they have a huge cafeteria, and all of their truckers are able to stop in there, right, and eat for a very discounted or free rate. And so as we went through the line and we were getting our food, it was, again, back in the 80s. And the things that were happening as we were walking through the line are the only women in the room, right? The whistling, the sexist comments. You never see any of that. I would hope not anyway today. But what I was impressed or I noticed is that she just walked with confidence. She ignored it. She shoved it off. It was the first sign to me that you have to walk with confidence. You have to walk tall. You have to not let that mentally mess with you. And then I went to work in the ag industry for the last half of my career. And that obviously is very male dominated. And again, I was very fortunate because I had a mentor. My husband is also in the ag industry. So my personal circle is always full of the male dominated folks in that industry as well. And again, the observation that you've just got to walk with that confidence. You can't let that lack of diversity bother you. And I think as I reflect on it, it's just like any other tough job or situation. You just look and reframe your mindset so that you can perform. And I think everybody's probably heard the term fake it till you make it, right? You just can't obsess over those obstacles. You have to focus on the conversation, how you can contribute to it. And you got to show respect to that diverse group through curiosity and just engaging, right, with educated questions and such. And really focus to learn or earn respect. And at the end of the day, I just think that respect is what allows you to lead and encourage others to follow you. If you try to demand it, people just see the situation as a battleground. And I'm pretty sure that learning that fake it till you make it has now become habitual with me. And the reason I say that is my daughter, who's now going through her medical clinicals, she got feedback the other day as she was doing some of her first time stuff that, wow, you really show a lot of confidence. And her response to that was, my mom taught me that. You just got to fake it till you make it. I just think I was fortunate to have some mentors who I was able to observe and to see that way to work through that.
Yeah, so it seems like you experienced a lot of male-dominated workplaces throughout your life, and you learned how to deal with that. And you talked about focusing on earning respect, and you talk about asking questions, thoughtful questions to understand the diversity around you, to also engage and add value. How have you earned respect in those situations?
Yeah, again, I think there's lots of ways that you do that. I can remember one time where we were doing a system integration with the Monsanto Bayer merger. And the Bayer team was very insistent on an inventory process. And we had done this particular process or tried this process and failed miserably. And I knew that the result was going to be an increase in a ton of manual work for the finance team. More importantly, it was really going to be a bad impact on our customers and Salesforce. Unfortunately, they were dismissing our experience or my experience. and I wasn't able to influence them in a direct way. And I think when you get to that situation, it just becomes, you can get yourself in a place where I'm right and you're wrong. And when you're not heard, you just have to reframe the question or your approach. And so in that particular situation, I reached out to third party validation, right? Bring in some of those customers that were influential or some of those outside IT people. Again, you have to sometimes put your ego to the side. And I know that's tough, but if you can reframe the situation so that the idea maybe looks like the opposing party, or in this case, bring in an influential third party like a customer, and then people hear things maybe in a different way versus you win and I lose kind of thing.
Yeah, so you find the win by reframing with potentially a third party or someone else who can bring maybe the missing parts for that puzzle to make sense for everyone.
Yeah.
And do you have a situation where you had to disagree with someone who was more senior than you?
Yeah, I don't think anyone goes through a career where they don't have that type of situation with a higher authority. I think in those situations, what brings success is if you can hone your emotional intelligence. I really think that's important. I can remember once being in a meeting with a very senior person, and they were just drilling me on KPI formulas, assumptions behind it, and just really detailed stuff. And unfortunately, what I didn't realize is emotionally, he was upset with the message that I was bringing, which was basically that the company wasn't making these KPIs or that these assumptions we had made weren't coming to fruition. And so as a result, I became defensive and I continued to defend and justify my position. And all I was really doing was making him more upset. And this was really a great learning for me because afterwards, fortunately, feedback's a gift. I had another senior person in the room who took me aside and said, look, you were focusing too much on his reaction and your personal defense of it, right? You've got to learn to read emotions around the table. And I kept saying, but he was making me feel like a fool, like I didn't know what I was talking about. And their trick, if you will, to me was, look, you've got to read that emotion around the table, and then you've got to read your own emotion. And if you're being defensive or upset, you've got to disengage emotionally. And when people are unwilling to listen, you just got to focus on what you control. And so the trick that I have to calm myself through a discrete distraction is I do this thing where I do my grocery list because it takes me completely away for a minute, but yet it looks like I'm still engaged because I'm writing stuff down and I'm looking and absorbing what's going on. But it's giving me a distraction enough in the moment so that I can calm myself down. And then when I'm calm, I can refocus on what I can control. And in that particular situation, it was very clear that we were going to have to take that discussion to another day or a one-on-one and gather some additional information, right? Not to mention let the emotions overall just calm down. So for me, the learning there is, right, read the room, understand the emotional intelligence that you can leverage, and then refocus yourself so that you can calm yourself down and really understand what you control in the moment.
And use the grocery list technique if needed.
Yeah, exactly.
And what about a situation where perhaps you were in a meeting and it wasn't leading or going anywhere productive and you really wanted to change that? What did you do in the situation to influence productivity?
Yeah, if you've ever been in one of those meetings where the room just feels like it's circling and circling and people aren't getting anywhere. And for me, again, I think there's another sense of emotional intelligence to understand that mood exists. But how do you wake up from the dream and say, oh my God, how do I save all of us from this, right? And I can remember one time where we were in this huge meeting, probably 30, 50 people in the meeting, right? And again, lots of perspectives, lots of debates. And we were focused on a sales process, right? That it could just be very generic for the products that we sell. And again, it was a room full of accountants. And what I recognized is that they really didn't know how these products were used on the farm, right? And once I recognized that the continual debate was really about an assumption that was wrong, rather than start the kind of win-lose situation, I decided to get their attention through some type of kind of funny statement, right? And so I was way in the back of the room and I just said, look, a jug is a jug, but a seed, it's a living organism, right? It's specific to a region. And I just said, have you guys ever seen palm trees in Canada? And the whole room got lighter. But yet the point was that they got the message, right? That what they were assuming and circling around, they just needed to, again, look at from a different perspective about the subject. And again, I just think that sometimes you have to wake the room up. And in that particular situation, it was a funny ha-ha, but I was focused on a point to get them to see a bit of the ridiculousness, if you will, on the assumption that they were making.
Yeah, it was a mix of humor and also with the question, have you ever seen palm trees in Canada? It's one of those rhetoric questions to get people to think about things, which is probably easier to do than the humor. Did you naturally have humor? Is that something that you use a lot? Or did you plan humor ahead of time?
Oh, I don't think you can plan it ahead of time. And I think, again, it kind of goes back to that emotional intelligence piece, right? If people are upset, you can't put humor into it. That's probably just going to fuel fire. But in that particular situation, nobody was really upset. It was just, I woke up, if you will, out of the dream and realized that we were arguing over something because we were crisscrossing each other and not understanding how the product is used. There was this gross assumption that everything could be used in the same place because it was like a jug, which was their experience chemistries. So again, I think using some type of, like you said, rhetorical question or something that's funny, it just distracts the mood, right? And leaves you from being in this winners and losers scenario and this circling to, oh, wait a minute, we are all looking at it the wrong way, right? It just creates some levity in the room and makes people just start to think a little differently.
Yeah, and since our theme today is leadership influence, you've mentioned this twice already, avoiding the win-lose situation, which is a competitive situation, and you're actually bringing everyone into a collaboration through these different techniques. And another thing that is important for leaders is often making tough decisions that not everyone's going to like.
Yeah.
How has that played out for you? Do you have an example of that?
Yeah. The one that comes to my mind is I've spent a lot of my career advocating and developing diverse candidates, and especially women of color. And it's really a known element of my brand, if you will. Once I was in a very senior talent review discussion, and I had a particular role that reported to me that had been filled by a male talent for almost a year. And this particular individual had really brought a lot of new ideas, some innovation. They had really created some very measurable business impact. And more importantly, they were just being embraced by their business partners significantly. So there was a lot of forward movement that had happened in the business. But my boss, who was leading this talent discussion, had recently received a D&I quota. And as a result, was really pressuring everyone in the room about how we were going to improve this D&I quota. And so he saw this fill in, if you will, as an opportunity to go post the role and fill it with a diverse candidate. And I think there's a couple learnings here, right? First one, obviously, is you got to really be cautious as a company about what you incentivize just to achieve a KPI or an incentive. And in my situation here, I was just reluctant because, first of all, it was going to take the business in a backwards position to start all over in a place where we had great momentum. This particular individual, despite the fact that it was not a diverse talent was really performing at a high level. And I knew that if we went through a very formal posting and hiring process, that everyone was going to know that we were doing some type of check the box process, because everyone in the team was very aware that this person was performing really great and was getting a lot of accolades from their business partners. People are observant, and you should never assume that they're not watching you as a leader. And as a leader, you have a brand to preserve. So you cannot be influenced by quotas or friendships, right? You have to earn respect for your brand by being fair and balanced in all situations. And this particular situation, I was willing to be penalized by my boss, because for me, it was preserving my reputation and brand amongst the team to be seen as that fair and balanced leader, knowing full well that people appreciated that I was very focused on developing diverse candidates. Again, I think bosses come and go, but your brand stays with you. So these are sort of, and as a leader, you have to be very rooted in those constantly.
Yeah, and what it shows is you had your own methods to support diversity, and you didn't have to necessarily follow a quota or something that was imposed on you, and you decided to do that in your own way, and what worked best for your leadership.
Exactly.
Do you have any other closing remarks or tips in terms of how to influence with emotional intelligence as a leader?
Yeah. Again, I think that emotional intelligence is something that I had to practice for a long time. I was fortunate enough to learn it early in my career. I got to practice it by being very conscious of it, watching people in a room. And one of the very first ways of just practicing it was observing that person in a meeting or a discussion that's not saying anything, right? And how do you invite them into the conversation by just simply saying, Harold, how do you feel about that? Or Jane, would you like to contribute something? Sometimes people just need an invitation, right? They don't all get the opportunities to develop confidence and faking it till you make it, like I have. Those are the types of things as a leader that I think you owe to others in the group. You owe development. That's how great leaders develop other leaders. And using your influence and your emotional intelligence and things like that, I think are just really important, especially as you become more senior in your career, to make sure that those leaders are getting developed.
Yeah, I love that last tip, helping others and being cognizant of the people that are not speaking up, because that happens a lot. A lot of people feel uncomfortable, and inviting them, so making it open, giving them the opportunity to contribute however they would like. Thank you so much for sharing these wonderful leadership stories and how we can all develop our emotional intelligence.
Great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. All right, let me stop the